All right. Yeah, I think this is actually kind of a good capstone to the day, right? I think we had a good conversation this morning. I think a lot of the stuff we're wrestling with as a community and as this group in particular, but even as a broader community, really is going to tie into some of what I'm going to be talking about here. So, end of the day, I'm going to ask us to kind of pull back a little bit, think big picture, kind of, let's scan the environment. Not just internally, but externally, all the things that are going on around us. And I'm going to talk a little bit about politics, culture, environment. We're doing a little bit of a different discussion, but it absolutely ties into all the things we've been talking about here. So I want to talk a little bit about how we're going to mature how I think we need to mature the organization. So some of the slides we're going to be looking at, I've pulled these slides actually from other presentations that I've been giving to our leadership. Probably the most recently was to the executive board, our executive board, back in January. That what I told them or what I talked to them about, and again, there are others, but I'll stick with them for right now, is look, we put a governance structure in place. I did not put the governance slide in this deck. We've all seen it many times. It's the governance chart. It's complex, it's complicated. It reflects the way the community is set up and the way we do business. So we put that in place. This goes all the way back to Jim Douglas. It really put in place in 2016 when I first arrived. What I've been telling folks, and when I talk about our leadership, the folks I'm talking about are the folks that are actually on our executive board. So for those who may or may not know, we do have a Wildland Fire IT executive board that I report to. That consists of Lisa Branham, Alex Robertson, Adam Mendonca, I'm saying Adam's last name right, Jeff Rupert, the two OCIOs, Gary Washington, Darren Ash, two ACIOs, Laura Hill and Harold Watkins. Those are the primary voting members. So I meet with them quarterly. We've got another meeting coming up in May. So what I've talked to them about is we put this WFIT governance structure in place back in fact, I said in 2016. It's served us pretty well, right? It has absolutely, I think, moved the ball down the field a little bit, but it is not the end state. I don't think it was ever meant to be the end state, and it's clearly not the end state. So where do we go from here, right? That's been the sort of the discussion. Go to the first slide. So we've got a lot of stuff coming at us, right? And we're not in a static environment. We're actually in a very dynamic environment. What I've talked about is if things were static, if things we were sort of in an environment that was somewhat stable, we could probably stay the way we are, but that's absolutely obviously not the case. We all kind of know that, right? We have got a lot of stuff coming at us externally from academia, other government agencies, industry, nonprofit organizations, state and local. We have a lot of folks coming at us. We have so many people coming at us right now that the Forest Service is actually setting up a database. Sean Triplett's doing this to actually manage all the people who are contacting us daily about, hey, I fixed your problem, right? So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of folks on the Hill and coming in from the White House that have also that are also coming at us in a lot of different ways. So we need to adapt to this, right? Just a lot of changes to the size, the complexity, just our technical environment. How do we deal with this, right? Again, it's changed dramatically even since I've gotten here, right? So things like artificial intelligence, satellite communications, Starlink, I mean, a lot of stuff. There's a long list of technologies that are starting to mature, are available. People are starting to use those things. How do we pull these things together in a cohesive way? The other thing is just demand signals from the field, right? We're getting there's a lot of new demand coming up from the bottom, from the actual field level. So again, dynamic environment, current governance structure, you heard me say this morning, the current governance structure that we have with sort of multiple agencies, multiple bureaus, multiple regions, all trying to do IT and trying to do that collectively. We could get away with it for a little while. But what I have told folks is, look, the portfolio, we're starting to fray at the edges, quite frankly, and some of that was reflected in the conversations we had this morning. So if we're gonna have any chance, right, of doing the things we want to do, or that we're being asked to do, we really need to start to think about what's next for us, right? And when I say what's next for us, I'm talking about structurally, right? As a management, governance, what is the next evolution for us? Go to the next slide, Don. This isn't just me talking. There's a lot of folks that have noticed the same issue, the same problem. So I've listed a few of them here that, as you may recall, the President's Council of Advisors for Science and Technology came out to see us. They published a report in February of 23. After spending quite a bit of time with us, that was the result of President Biden's visit to NIFC. It was about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, whenever that was. He sent this PCAST group out. They generated a report. If you haven't seen that report, I would highly recommend reading through it. It's extremely, I've been in government now for a long time. I've been in enterprise IT for a long time. It's one of the most well-done reports I've seen. They basically came in very quickly, kind of nailed the issues that we're up against. They made a whole host of recommendations. Now, the good news with that is actually the White House making those recommendations. So there's a lot of momentum behind that report. I'm going to get to that in a second. The Wildfire Commission report, which was recently published, that also talks to this a little bit. I'll go all the way back to 2015, right? There was a study done. Two of the folks in this room actually did that back in 2015, I believe it was. Mr. Torres and Mr. Noneman, on how do we evolve ourselves organizationally. In that report, they talk about 4 phases. We're sort of at phase 3.5, maybe 3.25. How do we move to phase 4? So again, not the only ones who have noticed this. It's also brought out even in the National Cohesive Strategy. I just mentioned recommendation 104. There's 160 some recommendations in that report. They talk about technology and the use of technology in there, but the one where they talk about the organizationally, the structure, is actually called out specifically in 104. So the point of this slide is, this isn't just me talking, right? There's some very high-powered external entities that have looked at this. Hey, is wildland fire effectively utilizing technology as well as it could? And is it set up organizationally to take on all these new technologies that are starting to, or even the things that exist right now? So go on the next slide, Don. So what's changed? I just came out with a list, and so a whole bunch of stuff, right? A whole bunch of things are different now today that were not necessarily here in 2016, or they've gotten more intense, right? So external pressures, right? That coming from the Hill. I don't know if you guys ever watched those Hill hearings that our bosses go to. They can be fairly intense, and technology comes up a lot, right? Why are you? And frankly, we're not necessarily giving them a good answer. How are you using technology to meet the wildland fire issue? The White House, that PCAST report, they continue to ask us about that. OMB specifically is asking our leadership, what are you doing about this PCAST report? I'm going to talk, we are doing some things about it, so I'm going to talk about that in a second. The demand signal from the field just gets more and more intense, right? I mean, every year that goes by. And this is an issue we talk about at the program board that I sometimes feel like we talk a lot about the firefighter, and it's all about the firefighter. And I sometimes I lay awake at night thinking, is that really true? Do we really understand what that demand signal is? We may be in good shape, we may not. I'm not sure. When I've talked to Adam and others about this, I really think we need to have a better forum for understanding that demand signal, hearing that out, right? From regional fire directors, ICs, what really are their issues and how do we adjust those into the portfolio? Because the way we're set up right now, even if we knew them, I'm not sure we could actually do much about them. Just emerging technologies, right? So this is the data management program. This is one of several major things going on right now. There's artificial intelligence, the entire UAS, all the things going on in UAS, and communications. We know that's an issue, right? The connections into the incident and the connection actually out to the fire line. Again, external organizations. We've got a whole bunch of folks coming at us from the private sector. You know, Lockheed Martin is one. I've actually listed them specifically because they're putting major investments into wildland fire. I can tell you their CEO is up in the Oval Office talking to President Biden and his staff about wildland fire and how Lockheed can help and how they're investing in it. Academia, other government agencies. So a lot of folks engaging with us. How do we adjust all that? How do we, I could literally spend my entire day doing nothing but talking to the folks that want to help wildland fire. A lot of them are coming in with a lot of money too. I mean, they have budget for some of this stuff, but we've had experience where they have built out products that we really can't, they're very difficult for us to use. The data management program, right, this is one of our success stories. We're embedding this now in everything we do. That is clearly a change from when I first arrived in 2016. So the portfolio, it's not shrinking, it grows. I don't know how many applications we're up to. We did that inventory back in 2017. You know, the number was huge then. It's only gotten bigger and it's only getting more complex. And so how do we effectively, efficiently manage that portfolio? Which brings me actually to the next point, which is cloud, right? So we're in the cloud. In fact, we're kind of all over the cloud. So how do we actually really take advantage of all the things that cloud offers with services? And how do we manage the portfolio, which is why I've resurrected the portfolio management project in part that Emmy and Chris are working on and a few others. I think we're going to talk about that tomorrow on the agenda. But how do we really take advantage of the cloud architecture, which gets at a whole bunch of the other stuff we've been talking about today? Standardization and modernization, dispatch centers, right? So there's an issue. There's a lot of talk about dispatch centers and how do we bring them up to a certain baseline. That's a very intense argument, or not argument, discussion going on right now, or the Forest Service side in particular. And then just skill connection and data. And how do we? So you guys have probably heard me say this before. We can have a beautiful portfolio with an awesome data management program, data that we understand, and if I can't get it to the people who need it, we've failed, right? So this is a big one, and it continues to be. We have definitely put some tools out there that we didn't have before. So we've made some progress, but it continues to be an issue, and will continue to be an issue, right? That field connection, and then the communication network actually at the incident. So ongoing issue. So lots changed since 2016 when we put this in place. The PMO, as such as it is, has not kept up with that. It needs to evolve. What is kind of the next step? So you guys probably also heard me say this. There's this thing called the WFIT PMO, which I hated that title from day one. I've got, I used to say 20 years, probably closer to 30 years of experience now in enterprise IT. When I hear to an IT person, when they hear the word PMO, they expect to see certain attributes. They expect to see certain things in a PMO. We don't have most of those, right? Almost none of them. We just never have any sort of resource or staff for it. I had that conversation actually with somebody before I even took the job. I said, yeah, I know, but this is as good as we can do right now. It's not the final end state. We're going to evolve this. So just know that. So we always kind of kept that name with it, PMO. So we've already looked at this, right? So when we talk about how do we evolve this, we've looked at this, right? We don't need another study necessarily. We've got a couple new studies that have said you need to do this. So that's not what I've been pitching up to chain of command. And by the way, I'm getting really good, I'm gonna go to the next slide. I'm actually getting a good response, right? Everybody, when I talk to them about this, understands major changes, more complex environment, being asked to do more. Got it. You need to evolve the organization. So this is just a quick slide. Some of the things that are actually out there that are having a major impact really this year. This PCAS report, we'll talk about that here in a second. NASA was called out in the PCAS report specifically as one of there's 5 primary recommendations in there. I'm going to talk mostly about PCAS here today because it's the one that impacts us the most. Although just know that there are a couple other ones out there that talk to the portfolio and talked about how we're managing technology in wildland fire. This NASA relationship if you're not involved in it right now directly, it is very real. They have 6 people budgeted and assigned to wildland fire. For those of us who were out in San Jose last week, talking about the NASA ConOps, and I'll talk about that here in a second. The Fire Environment Center. Some of you heard about this Fire Environment Center. NOAA has been pushing this as a concept. It's been described in a couple different ways. It's been described as a hurricane center for wildland fire, but it's a data. It's still being defined, but it's a data intel fusion center. The ability to take in a lot of information, things that are kind of spread across a bunch of different areas right now. So they're calling it the Fire Environment Center. I believe that's its name as of right now. Just know that that's out there as well. And then all the internal initiatives that we've got going on, right? I mean, there's so many different, when you look across all the stuff we've got going on, and the number of people we have and how we're resourced, there's a lot, right? And then of course the Wildland Fire Commission report, that was published. I think most of us have seen that. I forget, it's 100, I forget how many recommendations are in there. And there are some 167 or 47. Yeah. Go to the next one. So I'm going to talk now for talking about the PCAS report itself. So there's 5 main recommendations, or 2 that really I want to talk about today. The first one that they talked about, actually, I wish they put recommendation 2. That was recommendation number 1. But recommendation 2 talks about the establishment of a joint office for science and technology. If you go through and read that recommendation and how they propose laying this out, like I said, I really think they kind of nailed it. I wouldn't have written it any differently. I think there's a couple things. And in some of my conversations, this would be a major change, right? This is not creating a new group that reports into the fire management board or kind of the way we've done business in the past. It specifically calls for, and I have it in red here, cabinet delegated decision-making authorities. This is a science and technology office. It sits way up the chain of command, probably secretary or assistant secretary type report, with a lot of autonomy and a lot of authority. It's also, and they also talk about a mandate and a budget that would need to go with this, right? So Rochelle mentioned it this morning. People are getting money, right? That PCAS report is just by itself is an excellent example, because NASA is called out in that report. NASA took that report, ran to O&B with it, and got 6 people funded, just like that, right? So it's real, if we've got a good story to tell. So that's part of this. I think this joint office really is the next piece of our evolution. So there are a couple, I don't know how many, there's 8, 9 or so people really looking at what the attributes of this joint office should be. But I think for now, just know that it would sit high up the chain. It would have a lot of authority, and it would allow us to do and implement and manage and make budget requests to do the things we want to do. Right? So it's a completely different ballgame. It really is. I think it's kind of the end state, let's call it, for where we want to go organizationally. And we're at a time, I think we're at a really kind of cool time in our evolution, in our history. This is the time to start really thinking about this and do this. And again, the good news here is this is coming from the White House, right? This is not coming from Steve or anybody internally. This is actually coming from the White House to do this. So if there are folks who tried to kind of put this on the shelf, and that was not allowed to happen. I can tell you that there was a lot of pressure to, what are you guys doing about this, right? So I will tell you right now, there is money in the FY25 budget for this office. It's $5 million, 2.5 from DOI and from USDA to get it started. That's just meant to be seed money to get this started. Rochelle's comment this morning about, people are getting money, how come we're not? I think there's 2 pieces to that. Do we have a good story to tell? And are we asking for it, right? I mean, honestly, it came up last week in an email chain. DHS put in a budget request for $69 million for wildland fire sensors. $69 million. Now, I don't know if that's going to go anywhere. It's also mentioned in there that they owe a brief 2022 that they haven't given, and some other stuff. But the point is, those are the kind of numbers we really need to start thinking about, right? I mean, and that's a cultural mind shift for us to make that I think is important for us to start thinking about, right? We're sort of used to a 800K here, 25K there. Start thinking about when you talk about wildland fire as depending on how you want to count it, a $5 billion program. The money we spend on IT is ridiculously small. Right? It just is. And this was one of the original things I talked about when I first got here. I pulled some benchmarks out from Gartner, and we spend less than 1% of our funding on technology. So hang on, Patricia. Let me get to the because I'll hold on here for a second. Okay, so know that that's out there. You go to the next slide. So we are working on this issue. We are working with NASA right now. They took they're working on a couple things with us. This was recommendation 1 in the PCAS report, right? That NASA start to take a look at the concept of operations and a couple other things. If you go to the next slide, some of you are probably already involved in this. They're out actually doing interviews. There's a draft of the ConOps out there open for review and comment. I can provide you with the link if you don't have it. Yeah, it's up to 137 pages, something like that. In our meeting in San Jose last week, there are some issues with kind of the way this is. It's the early days for this. I think we need to put a couple basic project management things in place. We're working on that with them. This is not a NASA-led initiative. They really are working with us. They really want to work with us on this. But they're on the hook to provide three things right now: a concept of operations, a architecture, and a technology roadmap. Those three things. So what I have said, and I truly believe this is based on my experience, if I have a concept of operations, a technology roadmap that is well thought out, that we all agree to, and I have a proper organizational structure to implement that technology roadmap, sell that all day long back in DC. I can just tell you, I've lived in DC for 20 years. I can tell you we can sell that all day long, particularly if it has a NASA stamp on it, right? I mean, that's just the way it works in DC. NASA's on a roll right now, right? They put a helicopter on Mars and the Joint James Webb Telescope. If they put that little NASA stamp on there, that just gives us a little more cachet. So I'm really, I say that because I'm really happy that we're working this with NASA. They bring a lot to the table, obviously. I mean, they basically invented project management, if you think about it. The other thing I'll point out here is, notice this timeline goes out to FY29. So NASA's not going anywhere. They plan on being with us for a while, which again, I think is great. They bring so many assets to the table. So those are the three things that are working on right now. We've actually kicked off a technology roadmap ourselves. We're going to talk to our leadership about that. We're going to merge those two initiatives. And notice that these are being done in phases. So the first version of that ConOps is due, and the architecture is actually due at the end of the Q4 24. So they're on the hook for that first version. So yeah, Patricia, go ahead.
I was just wondering, I mean, that sounds great. But I'm just wondering, is anybody looking at all of the different areas that and those contracts that are working on trying to address pieces of what this initiative, I mean, you mentioned something about Emmy working on, like, there's a lot of pieces, and I'm just wondering, has somebody sat down and looked at all the contracts and pieces that have been put in place to try to address this, to how to bring them together as part of this, or who's kind of in what space so that people don't crash into each other and like have conflicts of what's being told or put in place?
We don't.
I mean, this is not something that like one small group is going to solve everything, but I hear of pieces all over the place. I'm really worried that like either work is going to get just null and void and you've wasted money on it in some areas. It's going to crash. It's not going to plug together.
Yeah, so I think I share the concern, which is why we brought back this portfolio management tool, right? So portfolio management means different things to different people, but basically the portfolio, this portfolio tool that's in Edge, part of the data management program to an extent, because they're using it for data. It gives you insight, right? I mean, it's a big deal to just know what we got, right? You'd be amazed how many people don't even know what's in their portfolio in an organization. So just knowing that and understanding, so what we've done,
Right,
Patricia, is
like you're saying, there is a piece there, but then there's here, like bringing that collective like efforts and kind of like, you know, people are working in different spaces, not even aware of the other pieces, what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so what if we do this right, and this is what we're doing, and there for each project in that tool, we should know, again, if we do this correctly, we'll know what the contracts are, where it's hosted, what's written in, what database technology it's using, what CRM is it using, all those things, right? So right out of the gate, unless we did this, you can immediately see there's some efficiency gained here. And who's working on each one of those individual projects. That's exactly what the tool should help us do. Because right now we have no way to see that. It's just who knows, who kind of knows. No one has the big picture right now. Probably the people in this group are probably the best equipped But no one can go, and I can't necessarily say right now, there's no reason for every application, why do I have 12 CRM systems? Why do I have 16 databases? Maybe I can have 2 or 3 databases that everybody's utilizing. And that's why when I mentioned taking full advantage of the cloud, that's what I'm talking about. So we're in the cloud now. Can we take full advantage of it? And who should be doing, the other question is who should be doing that for us, right? Want to do some of those things. If you look at the technology stack, the lower down the technology stack you go, I would prefer we get out of that business, right? So we can put our resources higher up the stack, things on end user interface, the things kind of higher up those tech stacks, right? That's the whole platform as a service concept. So let's get out of the network business, the server business, all that stuff to the extent that we can. It's hard to have that discussion right now because we don't know what everything is sitting on necessarily. Now, the people working on the project know, but that may not do you any good for those types of discussions. But I think that's why I resurrected that whole initiative. We killed it because we just weren't ready for it I think it was back in 2018 that they got unfunded. We just weren't ready for it. I think now we are. Sure. Yeah, right.
So what about something like SIT 209, which desperately needs a big remake, but lacks the funding. And it should be, the next generation should be going. So instead, they're basically trying to use an O&M contract to put little bits in to make it look better, instead of somebody getting some funding for them to do a project.
Yeah, so that was one of the really cool things that came out of this.
Yeah, that on that too, like staff too. Yeah, resource. I mean, we can't just keep asking people to take on more. So, yeah, but we need to modernize these applications that are important to our portfolio, but we're not giving them the tools and, to do their job.
Yeah. This is what I'm talking about with the cultural change, Cole. I mean, we need to get past this asking for these. We need to start thinking about real budgets for portfolio, the kind of portfolio we're talking about. We have to have that story to tell. That includes resources. So, Brad, one of the really cool things that came out of that last time we went down this road back, and Emmy remembers this, we came up with a life cycle chart. It was pretty cool, right? It showed where our applications were in the life cycle, and we had back then, our entire portfolio was in O&M, right? We weren't hardly spending any money on new initiatives. You want to have a healthy balance in that life cycle, and we were completely out of whack. So that discussion, in part, not entirely, there's a lot of reasons, that helped with the IROC discussion, right? When you have 90+%, which is what we had of your money going into O&M and almost nothing going into R&D, in the new development, we should be able to see those kinds of things, right? That's part of a good story to tell.
So do you think it's different now?
What's different?
What's that percentage to you right now?
I don't know.
Percentage to
I don't
you
know.
We're in O&M right now.
I don't know. I have no
You're
idea.
gonna see that we're 89%.
Probably.
I mean, that's some of our challenges is that, we need to get, most of the success was based on process re-engineering, doing quite a few changes to policy procedures and how we do things. I haven't done that yet. So until we can do that, and if you could hand me platforms as this, I've been asking, Chris isn't here, we've been asking, give us platform as service, and we'll go start trying to move half of our development effort today. But we don't have it.
Well, we've asked for it, right?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, is so we talk about some of these things, but it's a challenge that we would embrace it way more, and it would be more efficient. Now, I don't think you end up with one day. Concepts.
No, we
just
slow down to the 22 that we have.
And we find that even in our own small world, we end up with multiple basins because we don't want one to impact the other for different changes that need different bases. It's, we did it with NASA. It was phenomenally challenging to manage everybody's upgrade path to the new Oracle or something. Everyone had to agree to the new one and make all those changes, and it was 80% of the apps weren't funded. So, like I said, if we can re-engineer our secret processing or budget processing or security, then yes, I think we can be successful to do that, but we haven't been able to do that. I don't know where we could move forward with some of this to do that, because those are the requirements of that staffing report. If you look at it, it says, if you do some process reviewing, if, people aren't responsible for agency work, and if we don't do all these things, then you get to go to the next.
So let's do it one step at a time, though, John.
Oh, no, I agree.
Let's figure out what we have.
Give me something there. If you give us one of those things, I think we
Yeah,
can.
and I think the first thing is that environment.
That would be one of their steps. Yes, if you handed them a platform to do their job, their test on it. Oh, yeah, then
So
still need to get the staffing and the budget, and things like that. So the only thing, like I said, it seems like we keep getting the new ideas, the new money, and this is all new money. I think the NASA, it's great. I mean, it's cool, but I hear the Forest Service can't hire anybody because they're getting cut.
Yeah,
So that does not.
yeah, so
Yeah, Donna threw out positions that understand and support agile project management.
Yeah, that's the challenge in my head. I'm trying to figure out, I want to do all this. I think that, great. I think if we could have a lot more. PASS would be the perfect. You hand me some Windows
Chris is gonna.
servers, some of that stuff, then we would go do that.
So Chris is gonna answer that
But
question.
we don't have it. And then the Forest Service can't use the DOI one, and the DOI can't use the Forest Service, so that we're really giving to them. But if we can do that, I think it would be great. We'll just get some of those as our baby steps to go forward, but we've been waiting on some of that stuff for.
Still waiting.
Yeah.
It's a long trail of broken promises too.
Well, I mean, and maybe I don't understand, right? Maybe I don't understand some of the. But when we, and I just heard it on a call again Monday, I guess. And we do money for. We get money for this, we get money for that, right? We're not gonna let that fail. This is what we're allowing to fail. And so when I hear you, because I don't understand all the processes, obviously, but the NASA was able to, get money and go and do kind of thing. And I think of it in terms of like being an old FMO type person where we had burn plans on the shelf. And as soon as we got the money and as soon as we, hit the parameters, we could go out and light the fire kind of thing. And is it that we're not articulating our case? And I say we, I mean me, I'm not pointing any fingers. Yeah.
So I think there's a couple things, honestly, because some of it's so blunt, right? I'd ask for non-attribution, but there's a big group, that's probably not gonna happen. Not everybody back in DC really believes that wildland fire needs that much technology, and I'm talking about within wildland fire. So that's part of our battle, quite frankly. That we've made some, I can just tell you, just believe me, we've made some progress there, right? That those voices are getting less and less, and frankly, they're getting shut down by the executive branch, basically. So that's been part of it, not everywhere, but there's pockets of that for sure. So that's been part of it. The other piece is, we haven't really had a good story to tell, right? Which is why I think this NASA part is so important. And it's not 6 years out. They're on the hook to develop that first iteration of that tech roadmap and that ConOps